Yeah.
Okay, I think we're on.
Yes. Today we are interviewing Mr. Tim Lindley, who leads VaynerMedia's Asia Pacific region as its managing director. Welcome, sir.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. So, how does VaynerMedia's vision drive your approach to consumer-centric storytelling, and how has this vision evolved since you joined in 2021?
Our mission is very simple. Our mission is to get advertisers to start thinking consumer up, not boardroom down. It starts with a complete reevaluation of how you think about audiences. There's no one size fits all. There are lots of different types of consumers these days. So we start with a segmentation that we call cohorts, and it breaks people down into real meaningful groups based on how we capture their attention and how we create real value for them. From there, we add real layers of a deep understanding of platforms and culture. Platforms being the pipes of attention, culture being the water that flows through the pipes, the conversation that happens on those platforms. And the combination of truly understanding a cohort, truly understanding the platforms that they're engaging on and the cultural conversations they're engaged with, just gives brands a very consumer-centric way of ideating, bringing creative to market. And in a modern social media-driven world where TikTok and Instagram Reels and Snapchat and everything else out there has moved the global social needle from a social graph to an interest graph, you're able to now leverage creative as the targeting. It's given marketers an incredible tool to use creative as the way to reach a huge number of different audience cohorts. So our goal is to make brands more relevant to more people than ever before. We're in the perfect environment to do that. And that's happening across the world. So I'm super excited about our India entry. It's an incredibly relevant market for this, but across the whole of Asia Pacific, across the whole of the world. And we've seen this continue to grow. Marketers 5 years ago, 10 years ago wouldn't even think about this. Some marketers today still find it difficult to move away from boardroom-centric thinking, but more and more are kind of starting to realize the power of leaning into consumer-centric strategy.
Okay, great. So you're talking about the cultural aspects of this region. So how do you address the challenges of language, especially in markets like Indonesia, Vietnam, and how do you address the cultural nuances in these regions?
So it's exactly why we set up in these markets, right? We haven't got into every market yet. We're expanding. We're 5 years old in the Asia Pacific region. Jumping into India is a big step for us. There are a number of ways of addressing language challenges. If you have marketers who are trying to speak to multiple markets, multiple languages with limited resources, then sometimes it doesn't enable you to put people on the ground in every country. In which case, I think you can choose certain hub-spoke models to be able to address a lot of those issues. And finding people that have the language capability is not too difficult these days. Ideally, what we do is we place our strategy resource and our creative resource as close to the cultural epicenter as possible, which means having people in those markets. Especially, we have a role called a post-creative strategist, which is a role that we invented. It's instead of doing all your strategic thinking up front before creative goes out to market, it's recognizing that so much of the thinking and the direction happens once creative is out there and live in the world. The reaction to that creative, the comments that happen against it, understanding and contextualizing that performance and feeding that back into a very social-centric, consumer-centric engine allows us to be incredibly relevant and incredibly real-time. So we've successfully scaled into many markets across the region. India itself, we're into the market, but I think the next step will be understanding how we scale truly regionally. And we've already got through the team there the ability to scale into many of the regions, but it's a fascinating market with its as many languages in one country as we have maybe across the rest of Asia Pacific combined.
Yeah, that's true actually about India. Yeah, so what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that you have encountered in leading the operations across the region, and how has these challenges shaped your priorities and initiatives?
The biggest challenge we face is driving change. Change is scary. And if you're a marketer who's spent 10, 20, 30 years in a fairly traditional environment where you could get away with making a TV ad and that was it, It's scary to realize that now those channels don't quite have the same power as they used to. And even if they do, they're incredibly overpriced. The amount of engagement and attention that's happening in social channels across pretty much every single market around the world, especially in this region, is incredibly profound. And if you're a marketer that doesn't know that, leaning into it and truly embracing a modern marketing approach and understanding that the creative that goes to market through those channels looks and acts fundamentally differently to the creative that you're used to making, then that can be scary. So I think fear on the behalf of the marketer it's not a barrier per se. We've successfully managed to overcome it, but it takes a lot of education, a lot of empathy on our behalf. We talked about language. I think being able to scale into certain markets, some is easier to be able to operate outside in, some very, very difficult. Language challenges, cultural challenges. We have now scaled into 6 different countries across the region, like set up full agencies in 6 different countries. There'll be more. We'll continue growing. For now, India is the biggest priority. It's an incredibly exciting market. I think the other challenge is cost of creative. It's becoming prohibitive for many marketers. They realize they have to operate across so many different channels. And if we continue to do things the traditional way of making big, hard-hitting TV advertising that tries to hit singular audiences with singular assets, those assets are very expensive to create. They're unnecessarily expensive to create. So we're on a big mission to lower the cost of creative as well on a per unit basis and get clients to a point where they can create enormous amount of volume, like creative at scale, allowing them to be more relevant to more people than ever before.
Okay, great. So how is VaynerMedia incorporating artificial intelligence into its marketing strategies in the region, and what impact has AI had on your ability to deliver, consumer-centric campaigns?
The fascinating topic of AI.
Yeah,
look, we're early. I think everyone's early. Everyone's got their own points of view. There's no doubt it's going to fundamentally change everything we do. In terms of how it happens, at the moment, there are a lot of legal hurdles. And as an agency, it's very dependent on the clients that we engage with as to what level of risk they're willing to take with some of those legal challenges. Kind of lack of knowledge and understanding of the underlying kind of IP that sits behind some of these models stops people from jumping all the way in when it comes to like using Gen AI to create output. So there's some hurdles there for sure. That will all improve over time. From an operational perspective, I think and a productivity perspective, it's incredibly powerful. I see our teams using it all day, every day to improve process, to add strength and skill sets to team members. I see creatives using it as a sparring partner. I mean, that's behind the scenes. There's a huge amount of power that then unlocks potential in individuals who maybe don't have a specific skill set, but when partnered with AI tools are able to deliver so much more. So I love that. Like people who've got the hunger, the passion to learn, to develop, have now got a suite of tools that they never had before. And then there's some fascinating developments. If you look at the pace of change with our AI influencers, like some of those it's early, but it's going to grow incredibly quickly. And I think that there's going to be huge audiences watching people that don't exist in the very, very near future. In the same way as we've grown up watching influencers over the last 5, 10, 15 years take advantage of social channels, you're now going to see a whole bunch of people that don't even exist dominating these feeds as well. You'll be able to express yourself through them, and a huge amount of creativity is going to come from that. There'll be a huge disruption to the influencer marketing industry. So look, we're very early. We are very eyes open to the opportunity and the potential disruption. I think it's very exciting because with all of these technologies, it just brings opportunity to try more things, new things. And again, with this ambition of being more relevant to more people than ever before, being able to scale creative, being able to lower the cost of creative, these tools just give us new ways of being able to do that.
Okay. So can you provide an example of how it has enhanced your particular campaign or marketing initiatives in the region? Is there any example you can think of?
With AI?
Yeah.
So far, our clients are still on the side of like they're hedging and in terms of where their legal stance is on it. So we've not done a huge amount of work where like how the output has been driven by AI yet. I think it's gonna take some time for clients to really get on board with kind of understanding where their risk appetite is, what the tools are they want to understand. We're working with a lot of Fortune 500 brands. They have process to go through to understand how to leverage the technology. So look, it's an emerging space for sure. I'm excited for what's going to come. But so far, I think we're still focusing on helping clients get the basics right in social, like getting incredible organic social media at the core of their strategy to really understand kind of real audience feedback, how they create real value with their creative. In the future, I have no doubt there'll be AI tools that will scale and allow us to do that for even more people. There's obviously a lot of tools that are being built into the platforms from a media perspective. Again, when we're deep in the platforms, whenever we're using this from a media perspective, we're leveraging everything that is legitimately available to us. But we haven't had AI at the core of creative campaigns to date.
Okay. So you're talking about social. So VaynerMedia places social media at the center of its marketing strategy. How does this approach differentiate your agency from others in the industry?
It comes from social at the center is a very powerful concept when you truly understand what it means. What we're really saying is if you understand your audience enough to be able to create incredible, high-performing, organic social media creative, then you understand relevance. Like that creative will find its own targeting within modern platforms. It means you can engage multiple different sets of audiences with the right creative for them. You make your brand incredibly relevant. So your social engine, your everyday activity is already building your brand. On top of that, it's giving you an amazing feedback loop, an insights engine that allows you to contextualize why certain things work and why certain things don't. It validates your cohorts. It uncovers more new cohorts, new audience segments that you didn't realize existed, creating new opportunities. And then from those insights, it can facilitate and inform your campaigns. Then you still have your big tentpole campaigns, but instead of coming from a brief in a boardroom and the mind of a planner sitting there for 3 months thinking about a theoretical sort of possibility, it's come from a pre-validated idea that's out there in the real world with real consumers. So then campaigns become much more effective. Once you get that feedback engine and you start understanding what creative is over-indexing against what cohort, that allows you to decide where you're going to put media. You can put your media on your highest performing creative assets, allowing your media to work harder for you. So every dollar goes further. And if you start extrapolating that out across every single thing that a brand does, be that through above the line campaigns, be that through that social engine, be that through retail media, and everything else in the middle, you're taking real-time insight to feed a modern comms planning approach to put dollars against underpriced attention, making every dollar work harder against the right audience, and you're creating more relevance than ever before. It's a fundamentally different way of approaching marketing, which typically was, hey, we're going to do these 2 or 3 things across the year. These are the briefs. Go away and think of them for 6 months. Make an ad, throw it out in the world and pour media on it. The media acts as steroids. It pushes a huge amount of theoretical reach. You never really understand the impact. We rely completely on market mix modeling and other methods, which all have their inherent flaws to understand whether they were effective. And ultimately, unless we're measuring against sales, we don't know. We want to be able to put creative and media back together under one roof, not under a holding company, one roof. We want to be held accountable to sales. So using that social at the center insights engine, we are delivering always on social creative. We're delivering impeccable media buying against that. We're using it to inform our campaigns. We're using it to feed into all media, retail media, everything else. And then we're measuring sales uplift at the end of the day.
Okay, yeah. So what role does data play in shaping your social media strategies?
Sorry, can you say the question again?
I was talking about the role data plays in shaping your social media strategies.
Look, it's hugely important. I think we just need to make sure that we're focused on the right pieces of data. The most unique kind of aspect of a high-performing organic social media creative engine is you get a lot of quantitative and qualitative data coming off it. Quantitative piece can come from reach, performance, engagements, like all the numbers that you can look at and go, is this working? You focus on the right metrics, the most meaningful engagements, and you can contextualize performance. And then you have the qualitative piece of, you can read the comments on every single piece of creative. And it's not uncommon for us to start seeing themes and trends within comment threads that inform the next piece of creative. It makes the next piece better. It tells us more about the cohort. So you have an amazing always-on source of both qual and quant data. Once you start pouring media behind it, you have an enormous tap of quant data that can come from that. And then you inform your campaigns. And again, that goes out to big audiences. You start seeing crossover between cohorts, validation against those. So hugely important, right? And that's just within the ecosystem itself. Any other third-party data sources that we have access to can, of course, feed the intelligence. Like, we're feeding the engine with everything that we can possibly get. We look at data through a slightly different lens. It's not just about how much of it you can have, because typically those big models just get put into some massive warehouse and processed, and you're very rarely getting unique insights out of that. You need the people on the end of it to understand and interpret the data and turn that into real actionable insights, strategies, actions, and then make them happen. So we'll pull a whole bunch of stuff into the model, but actually the data that you get from the model functioning on a day-to-day basis gives you real actionable insight that you can act on immediately, and then acting on it and continually to contextualize performance, and then ultimately measuring that against sales data is the holy grail. That's where we're trying to get marketers to be. Think much more like salespeople, understand consumers, but be measured on the impact against your bottom line.
Okay. So how does VaynerMedia ensure that the consumer remains at the center of all its marketing efforts, and what processes or tools do you use to achieve this objective?
Cohorts is the central theme, right? Instead of approaching it with a mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive segmentation framework, like marketers have been taught to do for years, we approach it through audience cohorts. And audience cohorts are really quite specific, right? Gary, our founder, talks about cohorts with teeth, like real specific, detailed cohorts that really mean something. And the most important thing to understand is that a cohort is not just a definition of an audience that you could target with media. It needs to be a creative brief in its own right. All right, it could be, and the more specific, the better. This could be 22 to 27-year-old ladies in the Delhi area who have just shifted from their first job into a managerial position and are suddenly starting to realize how the world really works. Right? That's a very specific audience. You can kind of understand what they're like. Now, the pushback on that might be, well, how big is that? Does that hit everything? The point is that by being very specific, you can make creative for that audience. And if you're selling a mattress brand versus selling a cola brand versus selling a tech product, right? Now that cohort may or may not be relevant to you, but you can start understanding how your product is relevant to them. How do you position it as relevant to them? How do you come up with the creative? And in a world where we're coming up with so many different ideas and we're pushing creative at scale, high volume against these cohorts to engage them in an always on manner, that creative brief is hugely important. It needs to be a living, breathing brief. So the cohorts are designed to do that. Modern platforms, the creative finds its targeting, and then it creates a ripple effect. It finds its targeting, it succeeds in that absolute core cohort, but then there's a ripple out to audiences that look like that are similar, that are still engaging. So that's fundamentally how you keep consumer at the center. You don't define consumers as a 21 to 35-year-old woman in north of India. You describe it, as we talked about before, that real detail with real teeth that helps you understand what people really care about and how do you reach them. That allows you to get creative to them. It allows you to get the feedback loop of how they reacted to that creative. And ultimately, that's how you drive relevance. And that relevance is driving your reach, and it's driving the propensity of somebody to go, I can see how that product is relevant to my life. I'm moving to consideration to purchase. And then you have other tools available to you to start driving call to actions. You can take your best performing brand creative assets, turn them into high performing direct response assets, start retargeting the right audiences and leveraging smart media, and then push them through to direct to consumer sales, push them through low down the funnel in other businesses. So fundamentally, to be consumer first requires a shift from trying to put someone in a perfect box in a segmentation to trying to understand what they really care about and how you can be relevant to them.
Okay, so you talked about the potential you see in the Indian market for VaynerMedia, and so how do you kind of plan to leverage this potential to drive growth in the Asia Pacific region?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question on the growth piece?
Yeah, basically, I was asking, what potential do you see in the Indian market for VaynerMedia, and how do you plan to leverage this potential to drive growth in the Asia Pacific region?
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
India is I say it's a fascinating market. It's an understatement, right? It's huge. It's growing incredibly quickly. It has an enormous young population. It has one of the biggest social media audiences in the world. It has, a domestic and international entertainment business that is arguably the biggest in the world. It's the perfect canvas for modern marketers to leverage modern marketing tools, right? Social media channels are a marketer's dream when used correctly. Being able to then take the learnings from those and kind of inform your big campaigns across any media it should be a marketer's dream, right? You're just better informed. You're spending your money in better ways. India is the perfect canvas for the model to thrive. I'm super excited to be able to kind of work with brands both in the kind of Fortune 500 set, in the emerging technology set, in the startup set. You have such a variety of audiences, of cohorts in the country to be able to drive relevance with. You have huge diversity across the market, challenges around language, as we've already talked about, challenges around local culture. Like, I really enjoy those things because it allows us to fine tune the model to make it work even harder in as many different scenarios. So I think it gives us an amazing bed for growth. It gives us an amazing bed to further refine the model and make it work harder. It also gives us access to incredible talent. Like, the market has so much talent that's already proven it can execute value worldwide. I'm quite excited to see how that then plays in how our India team not only helps us execute work inside India, but how we bring those skills and expertise to help further our efforts across the region and across the world.
So, are there any specific industries or trends in India that you find particularly promising?
That's a very good question. Look, I think your technology sector is enormous and hugely thriving. A lot of new startups that are challenging kind of either incumbent ways of working, like older businesses, or are kind of replicating or learning from the success of businesses outside India and bringing those domestically. I think Fortune 500 companies internationally coming into the market, enormous market for growth. Honestly, the way people ask me this a lot, like, what's your ideal brand? Who would you like to work with? For me, it's less about the brand. It's less about the product. It's much more about the company, the leader, the CEO, the CMO. Like, how eyes open are they to understanding a modern consumer? And if they understand a modern consumer and they understand where attention is right now, then that becomes a fascinating engagement, because that's a journey that you can go on forever. You can shift, attention will shift, right? And when it does, we're ready for where it shifts. We're completely agnostic to any platform. We are a very social-centric agency at the moment because that's where attention lies. If all attention moved to newspapers tomorrow, that's where we would be. We would be the absolute experts in how to capture attention where it lies. So it being such a dynamic market is incredibly exciting as well, because you are going to see those enormous shifts in attention. The platform that may have the most attention in India in 2 years' time may not have been invented yet. So I'm much more excited about working with forward-thinking marketers who recognize the importance to progress the business and to find new ways of reaching consumers than I am with the product itself. I don't think it's always the right correlation.
Okay. So, what advice would you give to new marketers and advertisers who are just starting out in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape? Are there any common pitfalls you could caution against them?
It's a fascinating question. Look, for anyone starting out now, there's no better time to go into marketing. Social platforms are free for you to engage with. You can get the ability to enter the market has never been easier, it's never been broader. However, it's incredibly competitive. So you've got to work hard and you've got to do it right to stand out. Now, the benefit of that is you've got a lot of big incumbent businesses who've been used to doing things a very traditional way and are slow to change. Some of those recognize they need to change faster. Right? Love that. We work with many of them. Some of them are not changing. They're not changing fast enough, or they don't have the ability to change fast enough. It's an enormous opportunity for new marketers, new brands, new companies to come in, act incredibly natively to the platforms, understand the consumers, and find a real niche, a real segment that can grow into something absolutely enormous. Like, we've seen brands grow faster than ever in this environment because you have the ability, for the first time ever, you've got the ability to reach millions and millions of people with an Instagram account, for example, that has no followers. Right? It's like the interest graph takes your creative and shows it to people who it thinks are going to enjoy it. It doesn't show it to your followers. Right? This started with TikTok. Right? I appreciate India doesn't have TikTok at the moment, but it's spread across YouTube Shorts, across Reels, across Mosh, across Josh, across everything else. Right? It's like every platform has gone to interest graph short form video, and that will progress. That will change again. But right now, you have this ability to reach millions and millions of people without having to build a following of millions and millions of people. Right? The following will come, but it's all down to your creative. So my advice would be understand the modern attention framework. If you have a chance to read Gary's book, I have here, there we go, Day Trading Attention, he literally spells out the modern attention framework. Exactly. Some of the stuff that we've been talking about is very much how VaynerMedia and VaynerX operates. But it's a very different way of doing things, and it's how most marketers are not doing things. So if you're new to the space, understand that, move fast, trust it, and you will undoubtedly outperform those who have maybe been doing this for 100 years and are still trying to catch up.
Great. So that's all the questions I have now. Thanks a lot for.
You are very welcome.
Yeah.
I will hang on, let me just fix real